my god, I'm injured. Get me my lawyers. Hey, can you give me a PS5 while you're at it? They're sold out?
Have you ever wanted a popular thing?
Yes.
Do you ever get the popular thing you wanted?
No.
Supply and demand. I took an economics class in, a different lifetime, but I can tell you two things. One, nobody wanted Wii Fit U. Really? And two, video games are a popular hobby, not as much as collecting Joy-Cons, but society will advance eventually. However, when a new flashy game system comes out, what if I can't find one? What if I didn't pre-order the console? When can I walk into a store and just buy a PS5? We ain't at that time yet. I think it's a little unrealistic to expect a product to be immediately readily available at launch, especially from a large and popular company. So let's go through a history of all the ups and downs of particularly console launches and see how companies handled the mad rush to buy them. It all started in 1996 when Apple released the Apple Pippin. It's okay guys, Apple just didn't have the supply, but the demand was all there, I swear. So a lot of companies want to strike a perfect balance between being able to provide for their customers while also creating enough of a rush for people to want to care to have their product. Like, I don't really think I needed a Switch OLED, but when I saw one at Target, well, why wouldn't I? It's just a product that everybody else wants that you could have. I mean, when you actually break down the numbers and how much I play my Switch in handheld mode, ouch. In addition, it's important for manufacturers to be able to get the process down. Producing a whole lot of consoles to launch at the same time all over the world can be a daunting task. Now, let's go back in time to when this was acceptable. The NES was a massive success, yada yada, but what people at the time remembered is how hard they were to find, especially certain games. There was even that infamous 2020 segment where they interviewed a whole bunch of people saying how they've been trying to find this game for so long, I'd kill someone for it. So people have been speculating for decades on whether Nintendo had purposely deflated the market by selectively making cartridges to create a rush that would be eventually known as Nintendo Fever. No. Like, I get people's point. I just don't think there's a lot of validity that can back up this claim. Nintendo did all of their manufacturing of all games in-house. Sure, this meant that they could control the quality of the titles themselves. This severely slowed down the process and even caused third parties to get upset over such control. Plus, there was a massive chip shortage at this time. And trust me, if Nintendo really wanted to, I'm sure they could have sold even more if the world demand didn't just catch up to them. Now, if you really want to talk about purposeful shortages, just shrink the NES down in editing and slap it on a box. The NES Classic was Nintendo's way to make anything more than a nickel during the Wii U generation. It was a great idea. Throw a whole bunch of ROMs of games that most people don't care about today, make the cord length for the controller 2 feet long, and you have a perfect concoction of okay. Like, it was really appealing, but I swear, everybody that I knew that owned this thing all admitted that they, didn't even really play it that much. The selection is great, but you're bound to get attached to just a couple games and that's it. But to find one of these things, oh my god. For something that was simply a product for diehard Nintendo fans and maybe Generation X moms and dads who felt nostalgic over the simpler times, this had no reason to be as rare as it was. It was pretty clear that this was a deliberate attempt at artificial scarcity. At launch, stores got very few shipments, and the restocks were so small that stores could get 2 to 3 units every couple of weeks. It also stung a little more because Nintendo would come out making statements like, we want to make our customers as satisfied as possible, and we plan to produce more units to meet the demand. So canceling the production of the NES Classic was the right move in their eyes. And eventually when they did bring it back, they had more than enough units. Okay, Nintendo, one year you can barely produce a small box with ROMs in it, and the next year you can make so many that nobody even cares anymore. So after canceling the NES Classic, they decided to make the SNES Classic for consumerism. A win for Adam Smith. So this was kind of the same deal as the NES Classic, making it increasingly rare. But people were aware of the rarity, so they were prepared. I've seen videos of people camping out in advance so they can just get this thing. What the heck is a plane rock? It was cool that Star Fox 2 came with the system, but this was kind of the same deal as the NES Classic, except with fewer games. I actually got both of these when they were at their peak popularity. Now, you might be asking, how did a little white boy like me get such highly possessed items? I have my ways. No, really, the NES Classic was an extremely generous gift, and the SNES Classic was just me getting lucky. Didn't mean I played them that much, because what 12-year-old is squirming in their seat to play Ice Climbers? But if we want to talk about Nintendo Fever, we can't forget the Wii was a massive success. God, is it me, or does anybody introducing a semi-successful console go, wow, this console came out in this year and it sold well, had a decent library of games, and has a firm place in gaming history? So anyways, the Wii was a massive success and was crazy popular, coming out in 2006 to a massive audience of the casuals. The Wii was really hard to find the first couple years the console was released, and people wanted it so badly. If they saw a Wii and already had a Wii, they were gonna buy one more because one more can't hurt, right? History just repeats itself. But unlike other consoles, the games on this thing were also hard to find. This was before the world of online downloads, so if the newest Mario Kart or Smash Bros came out, well then I hope you camped out in front of your local Target. Even in 2022, companies still find a way to make their consumers scamper around to buy their products. The Xbox Series X and the PS5 are all incredibly sought after, but I do think it is kind of ridiculous. I remember when both companies wouldn't announce when their respective consoles were coming out, and finally when Xbox announced that it was coming out in 2020, Sony announced that their console was coming out in 2020 like a week later. Then Sony had to come out and act like they had planned the release date for months, and it wasn't because Microsoft had just announced that their console was coming out this year. This left a sour taste in my mouth as these consoles were launching with what was basically like no games. Even then, I don't see much of a reason to buy the newest consoles except for the eventual idea that they'll get good exclusives eventually. I know this is kind of the idea of every console, but it was really bad this generation. Like, what could you play? Miles Morales on PS5 when it came out? You could also play it on PS4 the same day. There's good titles for sure, but I think it's kind of ridiculous that it's a year and a half into this lifespan of these consoles, and not only do I feel like nobody owns one of these things, but nobody can buy one if they wanted to. Who's excited for Fallout in space? Now, I'm hesitant to say that these are the efforts of purposeful low production numbers. With COVID and everything surrounding that, I'm sure getting the launch and a consistent stream of consoles to be manufactured was hard, but that just left more reason to delay the launch. But if the other guy doesn't delay the launch, that's gonna look bad on us. But there is one more thing we need to talk about, infamous for its shortages, something that cannot be forgiven. Clay Fighter Sculptures Cut. You're a lunatic! Does anybody on the planet really want Clay Fighter Sculptures Cut? And if you do, have a frying pan. Rare games, not those rare games, these rare games. Now you might be saying, the only reason some of these schmoes who live in their mom's basement will want one of these things is, one, they have no real concept of the value of money because they buy a copious amount of things with no real value attached to them, and also because of the inherent value of them being rare or limited. Well, that makes it special. Like, did you ever want to play Super Bowling in your life? How about now? The idea of the rarest video games is hard for me to swallow because the only reason people want rare things is for the value attached to them. But most rare things in the extreme have such low units known to exist because nobody cared when they first came out. Most of these games suck, and if I printed a reproduction copy of the game, nobody would care or notice because is anybody really gonna ask me to boot up Super Bowling? Oh yeah, Amiibo exists too. Ha, Amiibo. They were pretty cool. Probably one of the only things that got Nintendo through the Wii U generation in addition to the box of ROMs they were selling. The idea of having Nintendo figures interactable with select Nintendo games was enough to crash GameStop's site. These things were incredibly popular, and if you were here in the States, you were stuck with the stinky Animal Crossing Amiibo and the clearance bin. While over in Europe, they had a whole treasure trove of Amiibo. I think it was painfully obvious that Nintendo was holding back to spike demand. How is it that I see 20 Marios in the store and yet no Wii Fit Trainer? Is she really that hard to produce? Though now, Nintendo, in my opinion, has a good supply of Amiibo, and despite the price increase, I don't know, I feel like they have supplemented it with a lot more quality in a lot of the newer Amiibos. They're just more consistent in their paint jobs and have more detail overall. Though if the Steve Amiibo is going to be like 20 bucks, that'll be a little ridiculous. It's literally just a block. I think it can be said that selling video games is a tough job. Getting it into some brick or mortar store is a tough thing. Shark Tank exists, you know. But sometimes I laugh at these companies when they either try to artificially affect the supply or act like it's not their fault or are just incompetent about it. Either one or the other, or even all three can apply. But that's what makes it fun in the end, is that I can profit off of somebody else's incompetence. Especially when one of those people pushes me down to the ground and gets me frenzied enough to want to call my lawyers.